Papua New Guinea, and welcome to another episode of Business PNG. Globally, the broadcasting media industry is transforming lives daily and rapidly. What was new a decade ago is now considered archaic and outdated. The Pacific Island countries are no different. Although a tad bit late when joining the shift from analog to digital media, broadcasters in the island nations are at a transitioning stage, urged by experts in the broadcast media industry to develop or be left behind as the rest of the world advances. It is increasingly recognized that broadcasting has an important role to play in development, as a widespread tool of information transfer, as a method to improve governance, as an important economic sector in its own right, and as a potential access point to new information and communications technologies. There has been significant development through technological advances, the success of telecom liberalization, and the central role of broadcasters in fostering creativity. It is incontestable that the past decade has seen quite a few developments in Papua New Guinea, according to ITU expert Dr. Andrew King.
I think for each country, really it's a case of the Pacific will get left behind in terms of actually being able to watch television, if things don't change soon. So there's slightly different dynamics to the rest of the world, but still it's now a case of technology has moved on and you won't be able to get the technology you're currently using. So, pardon me, that's why it's time to do the transition, and we'd really love to see countries coming across the line and being able to change. And then the people will be able to watch, far better pictures, get improved quality, and probably even more services as well.
Broadcasters around the Pacific face significant challenges when broadcasting through their respective, often remote regions. These include high cost of transitioning from analog to digital, a feat that is often elusive to island nations due to ICT services being so pricey.
Really, the main challenge for every one of you, unfortunately, is cost. That if we can overcome the cost hurdle, I think it'd be quite easy. The other challenge, really, in a couple of the countries, is a fear between free-to-air, the traditional free-to-air broadcasters, and the impact of the paid television groups that have commenced in those areas, and how they might work together, and one taking the other's place and whatever in the future. But there is a place for both, but it's just got to be worked out, and that's where I guess the regulator comes in each country to make sure that things are fair and reasonable.
ITU expert Dr. King, while discussing the challenges Pacific broadcasters face, said that broadcasters can future-proof the industry to ensure that they remain relevant, needed, and well utilized by audiences, whether they be viewers, listeners, online users, or social networkers, whether they live in great modern metropolitan centers of the Asia-Pacific with information and communication ever present at their fingertips, or in rural areas where analog radios and communal TVs still provide their main window on the wider world. A panel of experts in the media industry at the recent Asia-Pacific Media Partnership Conference hosted in Port Moresby discussed the future of broadcasting as well as the challenges that may arise.
I start with Neville, who wants to talk about future policy in PNG on going digital.
Thank you, Dr. Javed. I'm Neville Choi. I'm head of news with EMTV. I want to speak about government's role in media and in the digital transition. So first of all, EMTV as a public broadcaster, we believe in reliable and factual and timely information. As Mr. Sood has explained, we do have a multi-platform delivery service, and that rests on the credo that all the information we put out is validated, and it's reliable, and it's factual. And we do not air anything or put online anything that is not validated. Now, the government of Papua New Guinea has been supportive of public broadcasters and is very supportive of EMTV. And there's more that we feel as public broadcasters, and I speak on behalf of our colleagues in the region who are facing similar challenges that we are in this transition. So for Papua New Guinea, NICTA, and we have a representative here on the panel, and maybe he can explain some more of this. But we feel that the government can help us more as public broadcasters. And we've been given until next year in 2017 or May 2018 to effect this transition from analog transmission to digital terrestrial transmission. Although it is a set guideline and it sounds good in policy, it is quite technical. We feel that the technicalities to implement, if not done in a timely manner, could mean substantial revenue loss for free-to-air public broadcasters and information blackouts to consumers who rely on public broadcasting. And as you know, public broadcasting, we are in the business of changing people's lives. We go out to the rural areas. If we can't do that, then we need help. We need help in policy and we need help in government. So what needs to be done? So government, through NICTA, we would urge to seriously consider standardizing and subsidizing digital television sets and digital decoders for this process of the transition. Now, the whole reason why we are emphasizing this point is because the time taken to uptake the new digital transmission has more serious consequences for public broadcasters than the government may realize. So, government should be aware that even though we are running an analog transmission service and we do realize the benefits of transitioning to digital, analog services for Papua New Guinea still has a niche market. Because we don't have reliable power services into rural areas, that's where analog comes in. We at MTV, as I said, have a multi-delivery platform service. We want to reach the rural areas, people in remote areas who don't have access to reliable power to check mobile phones, which have now penetrated areas. So public broadcasters in Papua New Guinea, we need help from the government. And even though our good Minister Duma, who mentioned this morning that the government is not focused on revenue raising, but it wants to improve services, there is a way to work together to come up with a more reliable and cost-effective method to see this transition through. Yeah. Have I done my time?
Well, thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions before offering the floor, but the first one is, you said 2017 or early 18. Do you practically think that this is achievable?
Dr. Javed, at this point, if we don't get the message across and if we do not get the support, it is not very practical at this time.
One of the important challenges that we broadcasters, especially in developing countries, have is to create a constructive dialogue with governments, saying that investing on going digital is not costs, it's not expenses, it's investment, is to enable public to have access to more channels, to multimedia channels, and to have quality program. How do you see that process of negotiating, I would say, discussing and convincing policymakers in coming on board and investing on this matter?
Right. Well, I look at it from the priorities that government has as compared to the priorities that public broadcasters have, like MTV. The government's main priorities for the current administration are health, education, and infrastructure. At MTV, we have come up with locally produced programs that actually complement the government's priorities.
I think that is a very good point, meaning that what broadcasters, especially public broadcasters, are doing, actually complementing and supplementing the mandate of the government in health, in education, in matters related to public. And in that respect, I think public broadcasters, in addition to investing on going digital, should also be prepared in content delivery, because when the time comes, you have multi-channels and you have possibility to reach audience, so you have to be more prepared. What is your response in that respect?
I think preparation is not only for being prepared for the transition, but I think there needs to be policies in place to also protect content production by public broadcasters, and I mean original content.
I think this is something, as rightly said, Andrew also mentioned yesterday that for all public broadcasters who are analog at this stage, our biggest barrier is the cost to invest into digital and also to sustain in future when we move to digital. I feel at this stage that the dialogue that we need to have has to be very consultative, which we have just started perhaps a week ago with NICTA, I think when we called everybody together. But I think that dialogue has to go not to be one-sided, it has to be both-sided. It should be full duplex, as we say in technology, that, that standardization of decoders, standardization of or subsidizing of decoders, television sets, as you rightly mentioned, and also at the same time to create a level playing field for the existing analog broadcasters and the broadcasters who have just moved straight into digital, because they are 2 years ahead of us now. Yeah. Currently we have Digicel in that space. Our biggest challenge is that it will cost us a lot, and practically I believe that 2018, unless we start today or yesterday, I don't think we'll be able to achieve 2018 transition effectively. We may move there, but then you don't want digital broadcasters who have moved from analog to digital, as per the instructions or advice from the government, don't fall off completely. So we do need to have a situation where we work consultatively across, and NICTA as a regulator creates a level playing field for the existing analog broadcasters vis-a-vis with the digital broadcasters who are coming straight into the market.
Thank you. You want to comment, Andrew?
Thank you. Look, there's a couple of points that I'd like to make on this subject. I think that this morning I'd mentioned that it's no point in doing a digital conversion if you leave people behind. And that the people that can be left behind are generally parts of the community who are less well off. And typically for broadcasters to be able to find out how those people are going is very difficult. And I think that's where the role of government and government agencies comes in, to be able to monitor how many people have actually got a digital box when you do the digital conversion. And maybe then there might be processes where there may be, government may decide on having subsidies and whatever, but that's up to obviously something that government have to consider. But it's also being able to find the people who haven't converted. And generally those sort of tentacles into the community and getting feedback of community is something that government tends to be good about. I mean, you know, the cynic in me would say that politicians have to be good about knowing what the people are doing and what they're thinking, because otherwise they won't get voted into power. So they have ways, not only being in the political sphere, but even in arms of government, of knowing what the people are, where they're at, and how they're converted. I think the second point to make is to, I guess, reflect on the Australian experience. Whereas I was employed by one of the major networks that was based in the cities, and we had a total of 69 transmitters to cover a population that was just somewhere between 66% and 70% of Australia's population. Our regional affiliates basically were covering the other third of the country, but they had to have 367 transmitters to cover that other third. So they were particularly concerned at the length of time that it took for simulcasting between the analogue to digital, to allow people to go between one and the other. And for them, in the end, they had to go to government and have a subsidy from government in order to keep the analogue networks on air, because it was just costing them too much, because running essentially two networks was such a cost burden for them. So from a broadcaster point of view, if you could switch over the whole lot in a day, that'd be great. But you can't switch over all the viewers in a day. So somewhere you've got to strike a happy medium there, and that length of time and how you do that tends to be a role which government has to come in and have surveys or have some information campaigns, things like that, so that people know that they've got to buy a box and convert, and it's all got to happen by a certain date. One of the beauties of technology is it is very scalable. And so to have a smaller nation that might only have one television station, you can do that pretty economically these days. I think the benefits for the Pacific region, though, really is and part of the issue is generating benefits out of standardisation, so that whereas before we'd had a myriad of analogue standards, then we had digital standards, and although I realise that we're living in the Pacific generally in a DVB T2 is the proposal going forward, and I'm sitting next to someone who would be wanting an ISDB type thing. But I think generally in terms of standards, it's even within the DVB standard, it's to pick a group of tools that work for everybody and then say to the world, this is what we would like. And then you get benefits of manufacturing. So I'm thinking more of where you come for receivers and the receiver cost, which is the greater, when you look at the whole thing, the greater cost is the total cost of receivers than the cost of head-ends and what broadcasters have. And if the Pacific nations can meet together and say, yes, here's a standard, and this is basically what we want in a receiver, this is the sort of things we need, then everybody knows that they can make one thing and it could be sold into all the countries. Then you're getting the benefits of that manufacturing, and you get that if you're reducing that cost, of course you're reducing the cost at the point generally in the Pacific nations where people have the least capacity to pay, that is a lot of the households. So I think that's where, if you focus on that, you'll get the greatest benefit in terms of getting the other nations across. I mean, when Papua New Guinea converts, there will be a need for many hundreds of thousands of units. When Tonga converts, there might be a need for 10,000 units. So there's a scale there different, but if they happen to be the same units, 10,000 on top of a couple of 100,000 is not a big cost. But if you only made 10,000, it is a big cost. So I hope I've explained that correctly.
I would like now to invite Keela to advise us the challenges and opportunities from the local regulator perspective.
Thank you, Dr. Javed. Thank you all. The discussion around the advancements of technology, we're going from analog TV broadcasting to digital TV broadcasting. I'd just like to make a mention of NHK's presentation. And if you look closely at the presentation, they've gone from UHD, HD, UHD, 4K, and now 8K. And that is a really big leap in a very short span of time. And that's where Japan is at the moment. I think it's only Japan that is in 8K at the moment. Every other country, including the Pacific, I think Australia, they even reached 4K, even UHD. So as you can see, this is how the analog to digital transition is going. You see, these countries are way ahead of us. ITU, and because of the demand for mobile communications, part of the digital dividend, part of the TV band had to go for mobile broadband. Now, that also cost us, the ITU, for the broadcasters to go digital. From the regulator's point of view, yes, we understand it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, especially in the Pacific, as a country like Papua New Guinea. It's a very big challenge. We've set the date initially to 2017. Upon further review of the roadmap, we extended it to mid-2018. But it's a challenge, and it was good to hear. The Minister Duma, stating that they'll be back in the transition. But in saying that, the backing comes with financial, and I think that's not only in Papua New Guinea, not only in the Pacific. I think even in many other African countries who are yet to migrate, funding is the issue. And the challenges that we currently are facing at the moment. We understand the broadcasters need to buy new equipment. They need to switch analog transmitters to digital, buy encoders, decoders, subscriber management systems. All these costs, in terms of converting the equipment back to digital. We also understand the affordability of STBs, set-top boxes. 80% of our people live in the rural areas, less economic viability. It's going to be very costly. And the set-top box used to be for the elite. Because of the digital transmission, everybody needs a set-top box. If you don't have a television that has a digital tuner that can pick up the digital signal. But the set-top boxes are the concern for the consumer. So that's from Nick's perspective, these are the challenges that we need to overcome. We really need the financial backing of government. And one of the issues that we really need to sort out amongst ourselves. I know there's different stakeholders involved in the transition: broadcasters, the government, regulator, even the retailers that's going to be selling the set-top boxes. All of these, we need to work together. And like Banu mentioned, we came just before the meeting. We had a sit down together, and it was good to have all the different stakeholders in the room together. One of the issues that we were concerned about was the operation of the MUX, the multiplex. Who's going to own the multiplex? Operation and cost and maintenance of the multiplex. But we see a common multiplex as a solution for Papua New Guinea. We see the common multiplex as a solution. If all the free-to-air broadcasts can ride on the same platform, don't worry about the distribution and transmission costs that can be shared. All we need to do is going digital. We need to be innovative. It's all about content. Like they said, content is king. If you can develop, Banu just presented a presentation on OTT. It's all about content these days. It's not about distribution and transmission. It's all about content. That's how you win your viewers. So, in saying that, we will continue to work with the broadcasters. We'll continue to work with the government. We've also asked the ministry that for the transition to take place, we need at least some financial assistance in all aspects. In saying that, in my presentation yesterday, I also mentioned the Universal Access Fund that we have in NICTA, and this was due to the digital dividend but the bulk of the UHF spectrum was issued to the mobile operators. I think it's similar to what Australia had done. This was broadcasting spectrum that was taken away from the broadcasters, used for mobile IMT services, and the revenue generated from there, it should be fairly, in terms of this transition, should be fairly put towards some of the transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Kila.
And that's all from us tonight. For more business news, if you'd like to view this episode again, visit EMTV online at the URL at the bottom of the screen. Or for up-to-the-minute business news and updates, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Business PNG or on Tumblr. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this was Business PNG.